Coming up on Network Africa, the World Health Organization traces contacts in DR Congo's new Ebola case. Today marks World Malaria Day with the theme Harness Innovation to Reduce the Malaria Disease Burden and Save Lives. And United Nations urges probe as 168 are killed in Sudan's Darfur region. Hello there and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend. Here's more on the summary of stories.
A new case of Ebola has been confirmed in Northwestern Democratic Republic of Congo 4 months after the end of the country's last outbreak. The National Institute of Biomedical Research said on Saturday that a 31-year-old male was detected in Mbandaka City, the capital of Congo's Equateur province. The WHO said that efforts to contain the disease are already underway in Mbandaka and vaccination would commence soon. At least 12 African migrants died and another 10 were missing after 4 boats carrying 120 migrants sank off Tunisia as they tried to cross the Mediterranean to Italy. Officials say 98 migrants were also rescued off the coast of Sfax. The coastline of Sfax has become a major departure point for people fleeing conflict and poverty in Africa and the Middle East and seeking a better life in Europe. Guinea's deposed president, Alpha Condé, has been released from house arrest, can receive visitors, including family members, as was announced by the ruling military government on Saturday. The 84-year-old was removed by army officers last year and replaced by Doumbouya. He was allowed to go to the United Arab Emirates for medical treatment in January, returning to Guinea on April 10th. And on Sunday, 6 soldiers were killed and 20 injured in simultaneous attacks targeting 3 army bases in central Mali on Sunday. The army said in a statement targets in Severe, Niono and Bafo were all hit by armed terrorist groups who used suicide vehicles packed with explosives. Still in West Africa, Niger lawmakers approved a bill allowing the deployment of more European special forces to help stem a jihadist insurgency across the Sahel late on Friday. President Mohamed Bazoum agreed in February for the former French colony to host special forces from neighboring Mali as France withdraws troops deployed since 2013 to help fight Islamist militants who have since spread from Mali's arid north. The deployments will add to French and other European special forces already stationed along Niger's border with Mali in February, boosting military bases nationwide.
The World Health Organization says it has identified more than 100 people who came into contact with a new case of the Ebola virus in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It says they are being closely monitored for symptoms and vaccinations will start in the next few days. The DR Congo has experienced 14 outbreaks which have claimed thousands of lives. The military in Mali says it has restored control at 3 bases in central Mali after they were simultaneously attacked by jihadists. The military said in a statement that 6 soldiers died and 11 enemy fighters were killed, and there has also been an attack in neighboring Burkina Faso. In both countries, soldiers seized power after accusing the elected governments of failing to deal with the jihadist threat. The man now in charge of Burkina Faso, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba, recently announced the setting up of local committees that are to try holding talks with Islamist militants. Meanwhile, today is World Malaria Day, which is often marked annually to focus on global attention on malaria and its devastating impact on families, communities, and societal development, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. This year's theme, Harness Innovation to Reduce the Malaria Disease Burden and Save Lives, aligns with the call to urgently scale up innovations and development of new tools in the fight against malaria, while advocating for equitable access to malaria prevention and treatment within the context of building health systems resilience.
Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of people, mostly children living in Africa, succumb to malaria, an age-long mosquito-borne scourge. The World Health Organization, WHO, estimates that 627,000 people died in 2020, an increase of 12% from 2019, mainly due to disturbances in access to care linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some 241 million cases were recorded worldwide in 2020, 14 million more than a year earlier. Half the world's cases in 2020 were reported from 4 African countries. Children under 5 are the most vulnerable. In 2020, some 80% of the total malaria deaths on the African continent were in this age category. Before 2020, studies progressed on the transmission, steady progress on the transmission and treatment of malaria had been made, mostly through the use of insecticide-treated mosquito nets, testing, and effective drugs. In October 2021, the WHO recommended broad use of world's first malaria vaccine for children in sub-Saharan Africa. Health organization saying this long-awaited malaria vaccine is a breakthrough for science, child health, and malaria control. Using this vaccine, in addition to existing tools to prevent malaria, could save tens of thousands of young lives each year.
Well, joining us to discuss this is malariologist, Professor Wellington Oyibo, and he joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us today on the program.
Thank you, Tinola. Good afternoon to you. I'm happy to be with you in the program.
Okay, it's Joke this time, but
okay, Joke.
Happy to see you. Okay, so malaria is such a big issue. It plagues not just Nigeria, but the entire world. This time last year, the new malaria vaccine was being tested in Malawi, and now more than 1 million children in Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi have received 1 or more doses of the vaccine. Are we closer to finally eradicating this disease? 2030 is the target, I believe.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think we should say whether we are closer with some, I wouldn't say optimism. We are optimistic, but we are not at the stage of eradication yet. Of course, there are phases in the continuum as we deal with malaria. So at this time in the country, we are at the control phase. And at the control phase, it means that malaria still remains an important disease of public health importance. And when we leave this stage, we're working towards elimination, where we'll begin to have zero transmission. And that's a critical one for us as a country, and we are not there yet. Eradication, of course, we'll be talking about the global eradication of malaria as a disease. And again, that takes quite a lot of work, Johnny, going forward.
Right, so you just spoke about, global eradication. Now, it seems that it could be, when we look at things, it could be easier to say that it can be eradicated globally. But, there are things that we still need to do here in Nigeria that's, before we move towards eradicating it. I'm talking about environmental challenges and getting the people to own this, to know that they are, partially also responsible for ensuring that malaria is eradicated. How do we go about this?
Well, thank you very much, and I'm happy that you've used the right words. We have to own it, okay? Whatever you do not own, you cannot control. And of course, that means everyone is important. It means to the structures of governance, organizations, everyone must own it. As a country, in terms of government, we must own the direction and drive it where we want to go in Nigeria. And of course, as individuals, members of household, we need to own it. And the way forward is to really implement the measures that are known to work. I mean, sleeping under an insecticide treated nets is known to reduce malaria transmission, and of course, clinical malaria. Using the appropriate medicines when we have a confirmatory test done, that fever or other symptoms are caused by malaria is the right step to do. If we did otherwise, we're not going to be there. Now, if we do not do the environmental management and we think we can allow it slide, it's not going to work. So at different level, we have to own it, not just say it. We have to take the actions across board amongst the children, school children, amongst the adults, and of course, that's the way it will go to have that effect.
Right. So usually, as in the case of, a virus like COVID-19, where, there was a race to get the vaccine out, which, many believe was the easiest way, because what else can we do? Malaria too, it's been a long time coming to bring in this vaccine, and, other vaccines are on the horizon, including one called Matrix M, developed by Oxford University. How optimistic are you on the efficacy of these?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. The work around malaria vaccines, just with some other traditional vaccines we have known, is a long work. And of course, you look at the parasites and then the vectors that are all close to humans. And then the current vaccine that we're talking about, the RTSS vaccine, the Mosquirix, has taken 30 years. And before we have the authorization from the WHO. And even with the authorization, I wouldn't say it is where we're supposed to be, but it means that, what's available currently you can take. So, of course, optimism will mean the demonstration of efficacy of the vaccines. And until that one is done, we cannot see where we are with the Matrix M developed by the Oxford vaccine. So the clinical trials are going on, but I can tell you the dynamics around efficacy of vaccines in the past 30 years for different candidates, sometimes they come with optimism and then it drops. But again, of course, we have to be optimistic and hope that it works. Now, but when you have a vaccine for diseases like malaria, it's still not all about, putting an end to the disease, because it comes with lots of caveats, like the caveats we have right now with the RTSS. In fact, the caveat bundles us to now beginning to see how we'll do the needful. Getting everyone to be involved, because for RTSS to be effective as demonstrated in those countries, it was bundled along with other measures. So the use of long-lasting insecticide-treated nets, effective case management, and of course, other environmental management. Okay, use of indoor receiver spraying and all of those helps to at least ensure that we have 4 children, at least, who would have died safe. So, and for that vaccine that we're talking about, to play that role, then we have to be ready to ensure that all other control measures are available, they are accessible, they are used. And by the way, if you're talking about Kenya, and then you talk about Malawi, and then you talk about Ghana, these are all small countries. They're like states in Nigeria. And it meant that when we begin to implement, we're not going to implement, nationwide. You want to learn some lessons. Start from, certain states where you think you should reduce the burden. And then you want to have your lessons learned, and then you have a gradual scale up. But we have to do what we should do. Use other control measures.
Yes.
And there's no gainsaying about that. That has to be available for us to have the endpoints that we're looking at.
Right, thank you. Certainly. Thank you for your contributions there, Professor Wellington Oyinbo, a malariologist. Thank you for your contributions on World Malaria Day and what we need to do here in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to interface with you. on World Malaria Day.
Still to come on the program, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame in Uganda on a rare visit as ties warm up. Details in a moment. Welcome back. The United Nations has called for an investigation into the reported killing of at least 168 people in clashes in the Darfur region of Sudan. The UN Special Representative condemned the violence in Krink region of West Darfur, during which homes were set on fire, hospitals attacked, and goods looted. The General Coordinator for Refugees and Displaced Persons in Darfur, an independent aid group, said almost 100 more people were wounded in the violence. There have been some reports that the Sudanese authorities deployed a notorious militia called the Rapid Support Forces, which was formerly known as the Janjaweed. The International Committee of the Red Cross has warned of a rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation and called for the injured and sick to be allowed to seek help. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has held talks with Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni in his first visit to the northern neighbor after tensions in 2019 led to border closures for 3 years. A statement from the State House has said the two leaders agreed to push for peace and stability in the region by addressing the crisis in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo through the East African Community Bloc. Mr. Museveni urged the regional bloc to address the insecurity in Eastern DR Congo before the crisis there escalates, while Mr. Kagame said it was important that all parties in the conflict are involved to solve the crisis once and for all. Last week, Kenya, Burundi, Uganda, DR Congo and Rwanda agreed to deploy a regional force to fight rebel groups in the troubled region. President Kagame was on a private visit to the country to attend a dinner in honor of Mr. Museveni's son and commander of Uganda's land forces, who celebrated his 48th birthday over the weekend. VOA's reporter Halima Atumani is in Kampala. She joins us now for more on that. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Certainly. So what more can you tell us about this visit and what both leaders discussed?
Well, I think you basically mentioned most of what Kagame's arrival into Kampala was not really based on, on these side talks. But of course, currently, they have to be the big talk of the day. We all know that, a few days before the weekend, we saw the first son, who is also the commander of land forces, tweeting about his birthday. And then there was all these reports of traffic of the roads going to be closed, which was done over the weekend. So today is when we wake up to this release from State House that actually is Kagame and President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda had bilateral talks on the sides of this birthday to discuss the M23 rebellion. As you're aware, there's been thousands of DRC refugees crossing into Uganda because of the conflict and the ongoing fighting that has been taking place since November of last year, especially in the areas of Kivu or North Kivu, and that has caused a lot of destabilization. As you mentioned earlier, there's been talks in Nairobi, and we hope that maybe some talks, especially in regards to M23, will be held in 2 weeks' time. Does this mean there's been warming relations between Rwanda and Uganda? Well, maybe, the ice was broken. And remember, our borders were closed for close to 3 years, and here we are. So this first son who, goes to visit in March this year, he comes back, they call him the Twitter boy. And then he goes tweeting and says, my uncle is coming over for my birthday. So he comes over. Yes, he did. And so now we're not really sure if this birthday was, the beginning of greater times. Remember, before this whole, beef between Kagame and President Museveni, we used to see their pictures posted in our local newspapers of them, enjoying Christmas together. Both families would come together. So at the end of the day, I think when this conflict began, many people argued that, maybe this was more personal than really being official. And that's why we saw the border closure. But eventually, I know that before the closure, Kagame did set his foot down and said, I need a couple of things done. And I think that included firing the chief of military intelligence, who the Kagame government was accusing of, supporting some dissidents in Rwanda.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that next, really. You talked about warming up. Well, Kigali had in the past, as you just mentioned, accused Uganda of allowing dissidents and, of course, armed groups to use parts of the country as a base to plan attacks to destabilize Rwanda. As you've, hinted a little bit, do you see this meeting as an indication that ties between the two countries are indeed finally warming up?
I think we cannot really rule out that there will probably be a little bit of friction, but the fact that Kagame is here, we know that Kagame is, strong-headed. So is President Museveni, and I think it's this first son who is trying to, try and mend these relations. And these are two people who have been friends forever. Remember when President Museveni was still fighting in the bush, Kagame was one of his generals, during the war that led to President Museveni taking over as president of Uganda. Kagame was his person. And so seeing all these relations being set aside because of, I think a bit of accusations and allegations that both countries, by the way, continued to deny, even though after the closure, we saw a number of Rwandan officials or Rwandan so-called dissidents. Actually, these were people that Rwanda demanded that Uganda deport to their country for certain crimes. Uganda actually did deport a number of people. But also remember that we also had a certain point during this conflict where Uganda was accusing Rwanda of sending in some of their soldiers and sending in some of their militia to come and fight in Uganda. So we've had all these accusations and counter-accusations between the two countries. So yes, Kagame coming into Uganda now is definitely what relations warming up slowly by slowly. So we'll see what the future holds. Now that the border is open, Ugandans can get into Rwanda. I'm not really sure if Rwandans are freely entering Uganda because there's also still some question marks regarding that. So hopefully the fact that their president, Paul Kagame, has come into Uganda. So hopefully we will see more Rwandans freely coming into Kampala too, and Ugandans freely also crossing to the other side.
Yeah, so, Halima, the talks did come on the backdrop of last week's meeting in Nairobi by East African heads of state, in which they agreed to set up a regional military force bent on ending decades of insecurity in eastern DRC caused by militia groups. Speak to us a bit more on that.
Yes, so again, since November of last year, I think the M23 rebels accused the government of DRC of attacking some of their installations. And in reverse, the rebels also have gone ahead to attack. And that is why we're having loads of thousands of refugees crossing into Uganda. Now, while these two presidents are showing us that they know they are willing, they're supporting these talks, they really want to see the Nairobi, now I think we can call them the Nairobi M23 peace talks, happen. Remember that it's also these two countries that have previously been accused of supporting, again, different M23 groups in DRC. For example, in 2012, a UN report accused Rwanda and Uganda for supporting the M23 rebels. The report stated that Rwanda's defense minister was commanding a rebellion in eastern DRC that was being armed by Rwanda and Uganda. Of course, both Uganda and Rwanda denied these accusations. But again, in March of this year, which is not very long from today, this is just a month back, DRC government again accused Rwanda of supporting M23 rebels. So, and according to several diplomatic sources and some people close to, the DRC government, they say that while the states actually agreed on the need to find a non-military solution, but currently we all know that that it is a military confrontation. So we wait to see what happens. Is both Uganda and Rwanda actually meaning what they say? Because saying it is something different. But on the ground, are they staying away from the support that both the UN and the DRC government is accusing them of giving the M23 rebels? That remains a question for another day. But I guess all of these details will be coming out during the talks in Nairobi that will be happening soon.
We certainly look forward to hearing those details. Halima, the viewer is Halima Atumani. Thank you so much for joining us today on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.